Hey, hey, hey. Time for the Out of This World story from rSpace. Not everyone's down for whatever. Sometimes people have to learn that the hard way, no matter how much they try the pretend game. Today on rSpace, OP thought he could weather the storm of his wife's request for an open marriage. My wife's open marriage dreams crumbled when her family found out. I left her in the midst of her shame. Less than a week ago, I was scrolling through this place and reading some of the stories that some of you have shared, and that's when I came across 3 in a row related to open relationships. I've recently had to deal with an open marriage situation, and I think that's when I made a mental note to share my own story. Well, I finally got the time to write it all out, so I'm going to share how it went. Honestly, I wish I didn't have to deal with it, but since I did, I genuinely can't complain about the way it ended up going. For me, it was the best case scenario if you were forced to deal with an open marriage. So, my ex-wife, let's call her Alicia, 38 female, and I, 37 male, met back when we were in college. We started talking only when we were both seniors, and from there, things moved to a point where we started hanging out almost every day. Eventually, I realized that I liked her a lot, and I asked her out. Fortunately for me, she said yes right away, and that's been the story. Most of our relationship has been pretty good. She was a psychology major, and I appreciated how willing she always was for us to talk through our issues and any concerns or problems that we might have had in the relationship. Anyway, a few years after we started dating, I proposed. A full year after that, we got married. And since then, we had 8 years of marriage before all the problems began. And yes, I put every last ounce of the marriage's failure on her. I never felt like there was anything else that our marriage craved. We weren't super wealthy, but we were very comfortable. We hardly struggled, and I never took that for granted, especially because I know how much damage finances can do to relationships. We went out regularly to have fun and keep things from being boring. The bedroom was a great time too. We have 1 kid, a fantastic girl, 7 female. It was almost impossible for me to say that anything was wrong with our relationship because as far as I was concerned, and some of the people I decided to air my feelings to, there wasn't anything that they could spot that was inherently wrong with the relationship. We had established openness, so I would have expected her to say something if there was an issue. That's precisely why, when she told me we needed to talk about something, I never would have guessed in 1,000 tries what she was going to say. She didn't even waste time. I know this might come as a shock, but I've really been thinking about us trying out an open marriage. I knew I heard her right, but I had to sit there for almost a full minute, contemplating what she said and thinking of what I was supposed to say to hit that in return. I hadn't said anything before she had tried to rescue the situation. She said it wasn't about me, and it wasn't like I was insufficient in any way, but that she wanted a bit more adventure, and that wasn't something that one person could provide. At that point, I asked her why we couldn't try drastically new things in the bedroom if she wanted change, but she said it wasn't the same thing. I had to go quiet again to think about what she was saying. And it isn't like it'd just be me. You'd be able to seek out new things and experiences. I remember how annoyed I was that she was painting the entire thing as if we were talking about taking a trip to Spain or something. Obviously, I knew that the open marriage wasn't going to be a one-sided thing, but the concept was extremely unappealing to me because I knew I had no interest whatsoever in seeking someone else out. I was genuinely satisfied with her, but it was clear to me that I was on my own in that regard. That hurt. I told her that I was going to think about it because, naturally, it was a very heavy thing that she had dropped on me. She seemed satisfied with me saying that I'd think about it, and yeah, I thought about it a lot. The thing is, I wasn't even considering how many women I'd be able to pick up, since, as I said, I wasn't even interested in all that. However, I knew that if she started sleeping with other people, my urge to sleep with her would go down. I didn't want someone else's sloppy seconds. At the same time, as much as I can realize how dumb this is now, I really didn't want to let go of the love of my life because of something that could potentially be a two-way arrangement. At that time, it seemed different from cheating since I could technically cheat too. We had a kid too, and I didn't want to ruin things for a 7-year-old. I felt like it'd be selfish, although if I ended up resenting her mother, that'd be worse in the long term. So, I continued to think about it, and at a point, she came to me and asked if I had an answer. I said I didn't, and that was when she tried to entice me by telling me that it could potentially open us up to having threesomes without worry. She had a big grin on her face as if she felt like that was all she needed to say to win me over. Unfortunately, that didn't add any appeal, and I made that clear to her. I think what I ultimately realized was that making that decision to open things up was not permanent. If I didn't like it and somehow still wanted to be with her, that was an option. But I really couldn't entertain the thought of just leaving her at that point. I just kept thinking of my daughter. So I told her that we could give it a go. I haven't seen her that happy in a while. She pissed me off when she quipped, "I knew the threesome thing would get you on board." Did you really think that was all that made up the difference in my decision? I made it clear that the threesome thing did not change a thing for me. She didn't seem convinced because she had a stupid smirk on her face as I said that, but I honestly couldn't be bothered. So we left it at that. And it wasn't until about 3 days later that she came and asked whether we needed to establish some rules for the new state of the relationship. I told her that I was listening since I really didn't have much to contribute in that regard. She said she felt it would be better if we were open about when we did things, but I told her I had zero interest in that. I didn't want to know when she was going on dates with people or when she had a good time sleeping with someone else. That wasn't going to have a drop of benefit for my mental health. She seemed disappointed, and to be honest, I wasn't surprised. One thing I have noticed in the past is that women like to share their intimate exploits with men that they get close enough to, and I have no idea why. I think it might be because some of these women don't have female friends they can talk to about that sort of thing, so they choose to settle on guys since we tend to be more comfortable with them. She was clearly trying to turn me into the person that she could gush about each night with, and I was certainly not going to allow that to become my role. Although, I was amused by how she might have reacted if I came to her with an in-depth story about someone I slept with. I could imagine that wouldn't go down well. At the end of the whole thing, the only real ground rules that we came up with were that we couldn't engage with anyone that the other person knew, and we were meant to keep our business to ourselves. It seemed safest like that. Over the next 3 months, there were some days when she headed out, probably amounting to like 10 times in total, and I just naturally assumed that on each of those days, she was enjoying the perks of the open relationship. Looking back, it was kind of sad because I actually committed to myself not to take advantage of the new arrangement, and I stuck to that. I'm proud of myself for keeping the marriage pure from my side of business, even if it meant that I was a big fool watching my wife leave to go get railed on several occasions. The worst part is that she seemed to be enjoying herself immensely. At a point, I started heading out of the house to go and drink, watch a movie, or eat dinner on my own. Considering the circumstances, I found that it was helping my mental health, and at least made her feel like I was having fun too. If it would make her even a little bit envious, I was fine with that. Now, before I get into the next part, I need to let you all know that the city we live in is the same one that her parents live in, though they're about 45 minutes away from our house. I've run into them once or twice throughout the time that we've been living in the same city. Well, I ran into them about 3 full months after the open marriage had started. Her parents are absolutely lovely people, so it was a very nice encounter seeing them in the wild like that. It had been quite some time since I had last seen them. Through the pleasantries and the small talk, I felt like I might have imagined it, but I noticed that her mom seemed a little shifty, and I didn't understand what was going on. I asked her if she was okay, and she seemed startled by the question.
"We need to tell him."
She seemed to panic as she said that, and she was clutching onto her husband's arm. He tried to shush her, but that didn't seem to help the way she seemed. I asked what was wrong, and after a long pause during which she looked at him expectantly, he said that we should head to their car and talk. Now, Alicia doesn't have the most sparkling relationship with her parents, but they sort of get along well enough most of the time, especially now that she's a full-blown adult. Back around the time we met, though, the relationship was very sour, especially with her mom. I think their less than perfect relationship, or maybe the fact that her parents were deeply religious, was what led them to tell me what they told me instead of asking her directly. Or maybe it was because they hadn't figured out what to do yet, and I had bumped into them at the right time. Her father told me that they had gone for a friend's birthday dinner a few days prior, and coming out of the dinner venue, they saw their daughter and a man who clearly wasn't me, holding each other face to face. They were about to approach her when they saw the two of them kiss for about a second. They made it clear that they were very sure it was her, and they were very sure that the man wasn't me. However, they didn't know how to handle it, and were still trying to figure out what the next move was meant to be before I bumped into them. It was clear it would have been better for them to seek clarification from their daughter first, but I guess luck went my way. That was when I just sighed. I knew she wouldn't want her parents to know about the arrangement, but how else was I supposed to explain why they saw their daughter kissing another man in 4K? If an open marriage was such a good idea, I guess she wouldn't mind if I let people know, especially if it was meant to save her butt from a horrible situation. I could have left her to explain it, but there was something satisfying about being the one to break the news. I mean, I could at least get some sympathy from her parents. So yeah, I let them know that it wasn't a problem because we had an arrangement, and I gave them a basic explanation of how we were allowed to see other people. Her mom seemed confused, but her dad seemed to understand. "Are you fine with that?" He seemed incredulous. I knew he was a man like me that wouldn't be a fan of such an arrangement. He was probably a better man than me because I doubt that he would have let it slide the way that I did. I let him know that I wasn't fine with it and I hadn't been taking advantage of the arrangement, but I didn't want to put our marriage at risk, especially with our daughter in the mix. He understood, but he still seemed somewhat mad at the whole thing. It seemed over time that we had been talking, her mother seemed to get the gist of things, and she seemed rather distressed at the whole idea. I could understand how it wouldn't make any sense to her. Her dad just told me that we'd talk about it later, and we parted ways there. I honestly thought that would be it, but nope. The real mess began when I got back home and found Alicia absolutely fuming. She looked like she had cried her eyes out too. I remember being so confused, and slightly amused, as I walked into the house and she shouted, "You!" I had no idea what was going on, and I expressed that to her.
"Why did you tell my parents? Why?"
It was clear at that point that for some reason they might not have mentioned to her that they caught her making out with some guy in public. They might have only cut to the chase and lectured her about the open marriage. I asked her what the big deal was and whether it was meant to be a secret. That just made her madder. She said that I should have known that if I could tell anyone, it shouldn't have been her parents. It wasn't a secret, but I had no right to tell them that much about her life. It was at that point that I told her to quiet down. I was starting to get angry. I explained to her that they had caught her kissing some guy in public, and they were super confused. If they left that part out, it wasn't my fault. They could have either thought of their daughter as a cheater or a woman in some weird liberal marriage. I asked her to pick her poison. She just started crying. I swear, I couldn't help it. All the frustration of the open marriage arrangement had to pour out then, so I had to dig the knife in deeper. Isn't this what you wanted? Didn't you want us to be able to sleep with other people? Is the minor fact that your parents found out enough to crush those dreams? I had to tell them the truth because you put us in that position, not me. You knew I didn't want any part of this, so don't force me to uphold your dignity. At that point, she was sobbing uncontrollably. I was so mad, honestly. Each extra minute of her crying was driving me insane, and I think I completely lost it when she said, "I don't want to do this open marriage thing anymore. It was a mistake." I don't want to do this marriage thing anymore. You ruined this entire thing because you wanted to sleep with other people. If you knew you were so concerned about the opinions of others, you shouldn't have even gotten into this. I need you to get out of here in the next hour. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked like she had seen a ghost. I knew she wasn't expecting that since I had rolled over like a good boy the moment she said she wanted to open things. I had been weak then, but I had more than enough time to gain my strength, and I didn't want any more of the relationship. I couldn't trust her any longer. I couldn't even think about touching her after whatever she must have been through. She kept asking me if I was joking, and I kept repeating over and over that I wasn't. She only believed me when she followed me into our bedroom and I started packing some things up for her. I wasn't going to leave the house for her. It was mine, and I was going to make sure that she left instead, no matter what. It took way longer than I wanted because she was in absolute denial, but at the end of the day, I packed up her essentials and put them out on the porch. It was only an hour after that, when it was about 1 a.m., that I got her into an Uber to get to her parents' place. She could choose to detour to a hotel instead, but I liked the idea of her having to face the very people she wanted to face the least at that moment. Anyway, she came back the next week along with her parents. I was glad she came with some extra hands since there was more stuff that they'd need to take with them, but they seemed to have a different idea. Very reluctantly, her parents pleaded on her behalf. I could tell that they were still disappointed with the whole open marriage thing, but they still tried their best to get her back in my favor. I had made up my mind though, and I told them to stop wasting their breath because my no was no. Her dad gave up first, probably because he knew where I was coming from. She and her mom kept going, but I was tired of listening. Right there with her parents, I went upstairs and handed her a manila envelope. When she opened it up, she started crying. I respect her parents, so it took some balls, but I served Alicia right there in her parents' midst, and that seemed to crush her even more. Anyway, they eventually left the house and our contact got less and less up until the divorce proceedings. Needless to say, she had had enough time for her guilt to turn into vindictiveness. She didn't make things easy, and of all the things I owned, she wanted the house badly. She was ready to let everything else go if she could get the house, and that was something that I absolutely refused to let her get away with. Of course, we didn't reach an agreement, so a judge had to decide things for me. Unfortunately for me, she completely denied the claims about an open marriage, and I didn't have much proof to show that it had been her idea all along. The judge also wasn't convinced that I didn't partake in the perks of the open marriage. I think you can probably already see that this means I didn't get a clean sweep in the divorce settlement. Thankfully, the house remained mine, and that alone meant a whole lot to me. However, she got her way and I was ordered to pay her relatively substantial alimony for 5 years. We got 50-50 custody and I also have to pay child support. So yeah, I hardly got a good deal in the whole thing, which drives me mad. But it is what it is. I think it is worth the cost of being away from someone that you don't want to be with. It's been quite some time since all of these events, so I'm still paying alimony, which sucks, but I can't say that I'd have rather still been in the marriage with her, so I'm fine with the way that things go. Life is too short to keep yourself stuck with somebody who has betrayed your trust the way Alicia did to me, and I'm sure at some point in the future, I'll be completely healed. There's better things out there, brothers. Expecting you to just roll with the open marriage while making it clear that she had no intention of keeping things private either? That's disgusting. She sounds desperate for attention, especially when she goes full TMI mode and starts oversharing with her parents. Seriously? Nobody needs to hear that, especially parents. She was rubbing it in your face and expecting you to take it. No more. Rooting for you, OP. Has an ex ever tried to humiliate you like this? Share your stories with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Chat soon.